All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Logical Gamer Show. Have an episode today here. We're interviewing with Mr. Lewis Boadle. He's the art director of the upcoming game, The Precinct, the combination mix police simulator action game coming out later this year on PC, Xbox, and consoles, as well as PlayStation. Going to speak to us a little bit about the development of the game. How are you doing today, sir?
Very well, Michael. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to speak to us. I look forward to this. Very exciting.
I appreciate it. I bet it's probably the first interview you had about a police game with an actual police officer interviewing you about the development of the game.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, you have to go gentle on us here now.
That's it. Yeah, 23 years and counting here in New Jersey. So,
Is that right? Wow.
yeah. So one of the things I noticed is that the art style, the way it's set up, it really impressed me with the top-down view.
Mm,
It lets the lighting stand out, especially with the reflections of the police car in the roadway as they drive around in the
mm,
with the street from the street lights with the police car. Now you can
mm,
actually see those reflections on the road. Now,
mm.
was the decision to go with that type of setup with a view and the lighting is what resulted in the view of the lighting, or did you really want to say this is the lighting we want to have and setup we want to have and work off that? Like, which one was the basis for the start?
Well, I think like a lot of the things we do, it's quite an iterative process. When we're not the sort of company that sets out with a very hard and fast, this is the thing we're going to create, and then 4, 5, 6 years later, we've arrived at our destination. It's usually a lot of iteration, experimentation, trial and error. We abandon certain ideas as we go. But from a visual point of view, we always knew that we needed a distinct visual identity, and we made the decision to choose East Coast sort of sensibilities and visuals as opposed to West Coast. So rather than do a sort of California or LA thing, we wanted to double down on the sort of New York East Coast, get that gritty and grimy thing,
Okay.
as it's presented to us in movies. I should, emphasize that, our focus is always on how the police were presented in TVs and movie shows from the 80s to the 90s rather than a real world. This is exactly what it's like. So, some things are exaggerated, some things are overdone, but once we sort of locked into that, we sort of describe it as like the Blade Runner aesthetic,
Okay.
dark, lots of darkness, lots of rain, and lots of neon. And there's just something about that, throw in colors and it just pops, those combinations. So once we sort of stumbled across this direction and recognized how powerful that was visually, then we just sort of doubled down and just said, yeah, that's the way to go.
One of the things in the demo, which again is available now for anyone out on Steam that hasn't played it yet, it's a free download. Make sure you check that out as well. Is the decision to go with the visual novel aesthetic for the storytelling? You mentioned the different color approach, being that it's fully voice acted in
Hmm.
the game. Did that have anything to do with the decision to go with the visual novel approach for the storytelling, or what was the basis on that? Because it gives a good. I felt it gave a good sense of balance to the gameplay compared to that storytelling aspect.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we should probably ground it in our legacy and our previous game. We're only a small company, and although we have a fair amount of experience, collective experience in the team, our background for quite a few years was mobile games and more simpler sort of IPs. And then in 2015, we decided to turn back to our roots in console development, and we ended up making a game called American Fugitive, which was a top-down
Hmm.
survival, so almost like it ended up like a GTA
That was a
early
good game.
style
I
game.
like that game.
Thanks very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. But it started out a lot drier, a lot more sort of, survival, more like a sort of the forest game, that sort of thing. And then over time, we sort of embraced the arcade sensibilities. But the top-down viewpoint was is kind of born out of our limited resources, small teams, small budgets. We knew we could never compete with, the first person and third person games. And both Joe and I, Joe is the other company founder, we both of a certain age. So we very much remember the top-down games of the 80s and 90s. So we've always, got that sort of feeling of, creating nostalgia or retro, vintage feeling games. but the top-down thing was born out of, financial limitations, and we found that by pulling the camera out and up, we can get away with a lot more. We don't have to render buildings and characters and vehicles in incredible, level of detail that, the detail that people expect these days. Plus, it scratches that top-down itch that we,
Mm.
still feel is it's a fun system. And so, given the reasonable success of American Fugitive, we carried that over into this project. And although the game systems are flipped, you're the cops now, not the bad guys. We still wanted to remain true to that top-down aesthetic. So, and to your point about the character sprites, again, that just it comes out of financial restraints, time restraints, and resources. We don't have the budgets or the time to do fully rendered 3D cutscenes and all that. So, you need huge teams to do that sort of stuff these days. So, we've pared it back to a simpler aesthetic. As you say, it's sort of somewhat graphic novel, comic book inspired. But once, we found the artist who we found could, get that right balance between whimsical, cartoony, but also, a bit gritty, a bit sort of, somewhat serious. So it's, the graphic novel is a great way of describing it. But once we found the artist that fitted with that style, that informed a lot of other visual decisions. And then it's just a case of bringing it together and making sure that all the assets and the art style, both in game, and in the story cutscenes, that they match and they marry and somehow, by hook or by crook, we found a way, and we think hopefully found a nice cohesive style.
Yeah, like definitely has a good balance, like you said, the way it balances that approach balances I guess they want to say the rough and tumble action of the police chase.
Mm,
It throws it off. It makes you focus on both of them pretty well. I like that.
thank you.
One of the things in it about was the responsiveness of the controls too. I said there's a
Mm,
bit of like physics-based reactions when you
mm,
turn the corner in a police car. It's not just a straight 90-degree turn. It actually
mm,
drifts out a little bit. And
mm,
given like you mentioned, the constraints of the city with the top-down view, how everything is more like a congested city type. Was there
mm.
any difficulties in developing that? So where, like, say you want to oversell or undersell a turn, and crash out of the street too much, and as far as making it the physics responsiveness to that smaller type setup of that top-down view.
Well, I mean, I should preempt my response by saying, as art director, I couldn't speak to the technical or the code implications, and
Okay.
even really the design setup. We've numerous people over the years, because this the driving model dates back to our previous game, and although it's had a lot of improvements and enhancements, it is sort of had its roots in that game. So there's a lot of people have tinkered with that system over the years, including coders and designers doing the setup. But both this game and the previous game, we were trying to get that heavy sort of 1970s, 1980s feel of, where cars felt like they had a weight, they had they were, they didn't have all the technology and the ABS and all that stuff that modern cars had. So we wanted that sort of heavy, clunky, physical feel to those cars. And then it becomes a case of balancing the handling models with the architecture of the city. So making sure that our corners and our turns, they feel natural and they feel comfortable. And over time, hopefully, you can learn the attributes of the various cars and adjust your, you sort of you can kick out the back end a bit more and drift around those corners
Right.
and stuff. The rain makes a little bit of a difference, but it's one of those things we've tweaked over the years, and we're still making refinements on a weekly basis. And a lot of people, as I said, have had involved. But it comes down to looking at a lot of reference, playing the games that we enjoy, getting a sense of how heavy these should be, how floaty, how drifty, what sort of a difference the rain makes, for example. Um, and then just a lot of iteration. It just takes time, that stuff, and also being open to feedback. We recently held an open demo on Steam, as I'm sure you're aware, Michael, and just getting people's feedback, because those things are so subjective. And because we've been working with these game systems for basically years, you can become blind to it and become immune. So we have to be really responsive to feedback and listen to what people are saying. Is it too twitchy, not twitchy enough? It's too heavy, too sluggish, all that kind of stuff. So it's just it's about taking feedback in and being open to uh, to refining those systems.
The one thing that actually, as regards to the controls, that actually surprised me, only because of how, not because of your game, but more as like references in past games on how aerial controls have been, especially with flight, was with the helicopter.
Mm,
I was kind of nervous coming in, like how is this helicopter going to be? Because you play
mm,
certain games that are more involved, say like Battlefield, and you do
mm,
something very very minimal and you
mm,
crashed a helicopter.
mm.
And I was curious to see how it was going to be set up with that top down view being over the buildings. But I was surprised with how smooth it went, considering how you have to do the left stick, the right stick, the
Mm,
left trigger and left bumper to manipulate the flashlight at the same time. It
mm.
was pretty easy to do, as well as smooth movements for the helicopter. So was that kind of like along the same lines as the development of the cars, or was that more difficult?
I get the impression, I haven't been, directly involved in some of that work, or most of that work, but I get the impression it was harder because there's a sort of received logic and a received knowledge of how cars should handle, whether it's top down or first person or third person in terms of the controls. And so I think we all expect, left trigger, right trigger to be, accelerate and brake respectively. But with the helicopter, I think that there's not so much of a sort of set industry standard of this is how helicopters should control. And we've had numerous debates in the team,
Right.
depending on people's gaming background. Some people said, "Oh no, it should be this. You should be able to slew this way. You should be able to use the stick to pitch down, pitch up." And we found that people have different schools of thought based on whether they're sort of coming from a flight sim background or an arcadey background, or if they're just completely fresh to it. So we've tried to make that as accommodating as possible by having two different flight models. I don't know if you noticed that in the options, you can choose preset A and preset B,
Yes.
which basically have a few modifications. But again, I appreciate your positive feedback. That is good to hear. But it's the sort of thing that can easily be tweaked up to launch and even potentially after launch. But we think we found a sweet spot where it's that sort of balance between plausibility, the realism and also sort of arcade pick up and play.
Right. Now, we didn't get much of the main story in the demo. It was
Mm,
more of like a obviously a get used to the game setup type of thing.
yeah.
Outside of the aspect of your father got killed 5 years ago. Now,
Mm.
is the story set up in the game going to be certain missions that are tied to that advancement? Is it like someone like finding someone possibly related to his death, or is it more of that's the backstory with you following in his footsteps and working your way through the ranks type of setup?
So the way that the story works, I'm going to be careful here not to give too much away, but
Understandable.
the way the story works is you'll participate in a bunch of shifts, and on these shifts you'll be doing basically whatever the world throws at you, the sandbox, randomly generated crimes. And then as part of those missions, you'll have the opportunity to gather evidence around the world from, the crime scenes that you've interacted with.
Okay.
Say if there's a shootout, somebody might drop a weapon. You pick that up, then that ends up becoming a piece of evidence that you can hand into the evidence collection guy back at the station,
Hmm.
and then he'll add it to this chart, and that helps you progress up through the story. Basically, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that as part of the story, you'll be tackling some of the city's major gangs. There's two main gangs that are sort of vying for control, and by gathering this evidence, you'll work your way up through the leadership chain of the gangs, the sort of captain, underboss, boss, that sort of thing. So we're trying to find the balance between a decent story, but not a very tightly scripted story that gets frustrating to people who want to go out and explore the open world. So basically, you'll be doing these missions, these open world missions, and in doing that, that contributes to key trigger points through the gang ladder that will
Okay.
enable the next scene, the next the bad guy, the big boss battles, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Actually brings me to my next question. It's that you mentioned going out on your own and handing in the evidence collection.
Hmm.
Now, after booking a criminal and ending your shift at your desk, um, how much after that, outside of that, how much freedom will we have to go out and do on our own? Say, where we arrested a guy and it prompts us to go back to headquarters and finish our shift. But say I don't want to do it. I just want to drive around. Do
Mm.
we have that
Yeah.
option to just drive around and look for other things pop up?
Yes, yes, within reason. One of our guiding principles has been to afford the player as much freedom as possible, because we recognize that people want free roam play. They want a cop game where you can, free roam. And that was our
Right.
impetus. That's what brought us to this point. That's why we made this game, because we recognized that it was just something that was underserved. There weren't many cop games out there, especially not at a uniform cop level. We make a very important distinction between cop games and detective games. There's some great detective games out there, and with some
Right.
very sort of, very sophisticated mechanics. Look at LA Noire, for example.
Mm,
But we're not trying to be that. And as tempting as it is to sometimes say, what about if you start, doing fingerprints this or DNA this? We're just like, that's a different thing. And I'm sure, you know better than we do that, there's a big distinction between, the grunt work that a beat cop is doing and the
right.
detective work. Having said that, in the story you do assist the detectives. And so, there's a little bit of crossover there, but they're very much like taking the lead, and you're sort of doing, the dangerous stuff, the grunt work. Um, but yeah, no, our guiding principle is giving the player as much freedom as we possibly can. So, for example, when you reach the end of your designated shift time, if you want to keep going, keep going. You'll get a little message that pops up and says, your shift has ended, but if you still want to pick up a couple of muggers or the low level criminals, that's fine. You can bring them back. I think it only gets to a certain point if you've been playing for an inordinately long time after your
Right.
shift ends. It now says, okay, come on, you've got to wrap it up now. Just be realistic here.
Yeah.
It's
It's
unpaid
been
overtime after all.
yeah, it's been 2 days. Come on. Uh,
Exactly.
I know I noticed a lot of the weapons available as upgrades in the
Mm,
demo. Now, obviously, they were locked in the demo, whether they were
mm,
shotguns and assault
mm,
rifles.
mm.
How will we earn these in games? And do they just unlock after certain things? We have to buy them, and are they going to be different types of police vehicles too, like motorcycles or any
Mm,
types of cruisers, as on top of the standard
mm.
one that we saw in the demo?
So in terms of, I mean, they both kind of work the same, both weapons and vehicles. The way it works is that as you work your way through the game, uh, completing callouts, you'll be awarded XP based on how well the game thinks you handled a particular call out. Obviously, there's a preferred way you should do things, and if you veer too wildly from that, you'll be deducted a little bit of XP. Hopefully, not too much. We try to not strip all the fun out of it by being too sort of strict on the player.
Right.
But the more you do things the way you're meant to, and we guide the player with a handbook, then the more XP you're awarded. And as you earn XP, then you can rank up, and you'll earn upgrade points as you complete these missions. And it's with these upgrade points that you can buy upgrades. But the weapons and the vehicles, they're tied to your rank. So we have basically 20 ranks, still very much within the beat cop promotion scale. You won't
Okay.
go off and become like a high ranking top brass or anything like that. But within the realm of being a beat cop, you with 20 ranks, and then as you progress through those, certain assets will become unlocked, and sometimes it's vehicles, sometimes it's weapons, and then sometimes it's a particular unique type of shift or particular type of patrol. Like you'll unlock helicopter patrols, or you'll unlock a drug related, a drug crackdown shift, for example, at a particular rank. So hopefully that sort of progression system encourages the player to keep going.
Okay. Uh, Two more questions. One was
Mm,
there was a good balance between graphics, gameplay, the controls, the overall setup, which is hard. It's hard for um, simulator type games to see, like, because there is a mix between police simulator aspect with
mm,
being able to write parking tickets and do everything, and there's also that action, the GTA 2 top down American Fugitive type setup where you can go out and do your own thing. And I noticed a lot of games when you play them, they have obviously they have a little bit, but they're geared more towards, say, a simulator, or they're geared more
mm,
towards an action, because
mm.
adding one by default is going to take away from the other. How was it that you were able to get a good balance in there without taking away, like by adding to one without taking away from the other?
I would say that comes down to the incentives and the way that our company, Fallen Tree Games, the way that we work, um, and the interests of Joe and I. So the two company founders. So Joe is from a more sort of arcadey background. He is big. He has a family, so he has limited time to play games.
Right.
So when he does, sort of pick up and play kind of thing. I don't have children, so I can invest a bit more time into some of the gaming experiences that I like. So I tend to lean more towards the more sort of simulatory things, and so that sort of natural tension that exists between the two of us, him pulling us arcadey and me pulling us towards the simulator stuff, we sort of agree begrudgingly to meet in the middle, and then somehow it works out,
Right.
and and also things that we thought would potentially be boring, like parking tickets, we've come to realize as they were in American Fugitive, not you don't want to be doing shootouts the whole time. Sometimes it's nice just, to rummage through somebody's house or, go and eat an apple or do
Yeah.
something nondescript. And it just comes down to pacing because people they don't want to play stressful experiences the whole time. You need a bit of time to unwind, relax, to
Mm.
do something low stress so that when you do the high stress stuff you're ready for it. And we sort of brought that sensibility over to this game, that sort of meeting somewhere in between. I think at the start of the project we had a sort of visual matrix that we used to use internally to keep us on track, and that sort of showed the very arcadey experiences of other games on one side. I won't name other games. I don't think it's fair, and then the very on the other extreme, the more the drier games. And we just said, look, this is the spectrum of cop sort of experiences, arcadey to simulator.
Mm.
We want to be slap bang in the middle. We just want to be that sort of middle of the road thing, and give people enough of the verisimilitude of that sort of realistic experience so that they feel they can invest in the role, they can do a bit of role playing, they can
Right.
feel like they're a cop, but at the same time, not boring people with just really dry onboarding experiences. So the TV and movie thing, that I refer to a lot. That's another sort of guiding principle of, if in doubt, that then look at some of the classic movies from those eras and go that way. But we were pleasantly surprised at how engrossing, some of the drier elements that could have easily been boring, like parking tickets. We were surprised at how satisfying that is when it's that drop down in pace. Once you've been doing a bank robbery, to then go and do a couple of parking tickets is a lovely change of pace. So we just think it's just about variety.
Okay.
That's the key thing for us, is just making it as varied experience as we possibly can.
Now, last question is,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you guys have decided yet or not, but originally I think the game was scheduled to come out in September,
Hmm.
and it was delayed to fall
Hmm.
24. Now, I know
Hmm.
that's technically now we got a little
Hmm.
bit of time left until the winter starts.
Hmm.
Do we have a release date yet that you're able to share? Or
We don't have any further information on that other than
okay,
to say we're still aiming for quarter four. It's a big undertaking, a game like this. There's a lot of potential for bugs, and so we just want to take our time, make sure we get it right. We're not going to rush a release date and
okay.
commit to something that we might not hit. Our focus is on quality and delivering the best possible experience that we possibly can. But yeah, at the minute, quarter four this
It's
year
and
is
it
still our
still
target.
would be same day, same time, PC consoles, same time.
That's the plan. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, I really appreciate it. I hope it was interesting trying to get an interview from about a police game from an actual police officer for the first
I
time.
I would love to talk for longer and be able to pick your brains. I'm sure you could tell some fascinating stories that would make for great DLC.
You could probably make a Michael Bacher police video game based on 23 years of what I tell you. That'd be
I,
amazing.
I could absolutely believe it. Yeah, we had
So,
a MIPD consultant with us who served in the 70s and 80s and then wrote a
okay.
few books about it. And
Right.
he's given us some low-level advice about some
Mm.
of the vernacular and the language. A lot of the things he suggested, we say, look, we're just going to do it like this because this is more fun.
Right.
But it's great. It was great to have those sort of eyes on it, and I'm sure you'd bring some, fascinating
Yeah,
insights.
it's great. But I'm excited about the demo. Can't wait for the game. And again, for everybody listening, the demo now is the Precinct that's out now on Steam, with a release date for PC and consoles later on this year. Mr. Bodo, really appreciate you taking the time for talking to us. If there's anything else you need to add before we leave about anything that people should be looking out for about the game.
Just to thank everybody for the support. It's been an absolute whirlwind, the last few months, especially around the time of the demo. As you can imagine, making a game around a concept as complex and nuanced as policing is a tricky task. And with the assistance of my friends over at Kwalee, they've helped us navigate those tricky waters because it would be easy to get it wrong or make missteps or end up on the wrong side of a controversy, which that doesn't interest us. We want to forge an ethical, delicate path that is that it talks about the references, the movies and the TV shows, rather than some of the political sensitivities that exist in the real world. But yeah, no, the support has just been absolutely incredible, and thanks everybody. We're hoping to really deliver something that's just going to blow you away.
That's it. I appreciate you taking the time and look forward to the full game release. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Talk soon now.
So